Hello, lovelies, and welcome back. I'm Lex Carline, and this is Seriously Now. Now, as some of you may have noticed, I failed last week. It was half term, and it all went wrong. So here I am, grovelling again. I'm sorry. I will get better with my time management one day. But anyway, today we're going to look at one that... well, as far as the authorities are concerned, it's a done deal, but I'm not so convinced. So we're going to see what you guys think too. On the 11th of January 2013, the body of 17-year-old Kendrick Johnson was found in the gymnasium of Lowndes High School in Valdosta, Georgia, rolled up vertically in a mat. So was it just a simple accident or something more sinister? Let's dive in. Kendrick's family described him as a sweet and quiet boy, and he was a three-sport athlete and dreamed one day of playing professional football. He also played basketball and ran track, and he was often the kid that stayed late at school to shoot hoops or catch a game, so when he didn't return home after school on the 10th of January, his mum didn't really think too much about it. Just par for the course. However, when he still didn't come home later, Jacqueline started to worry, as any mother would. She checked in with his father to see if he'd been in touch with him and reached out to some of his other friends and family, but unfortunately nobody had heard from him. So she quickly filed a missing persons report. And as a parent, that is a massive fear of mine. Just one day your child just doesn't come home. Yeah. Hopefully, none of us ever have to find out what that's like. The following day, Jacqueline went to the school to alert staff to what had happened and the fact that Kendrick was missing. And also, obviously, to see if he'd randomly shown up, if he'd stayed at a friend's and just rocked up at school, and was going to face the music with his parents later. I'm sure many of us have been there. Now, Jacqueline recalls that the counsellor hadn't heard, but whilst she was in the office, the phone rang. And she could hear the voice at the other end saying that they'd just found a body in the gym. And she said she was absolutely breaking into pieces because she just knew that it was her child. And unfortunately, it was. Students found Kendrick's sock-covered feet sticking out of the top of the rolled-up gym mat, and it was just standing upright in a corner. The students had climbed up onto the top of a cluster of mats, and these mats stood at nearly 6 feet tall and about 3 feet wide. Now, the hole in the rolled-up mat had a diameter of around 14 inches. Kendrick's shoulders, however, measured 19 inches across, and he was about 5'10". So it is possible that he squished himself up to try and reach inside for something, but his parents later were adamant that his size versus the size of the mat was enough to debunk the investigators' case. And what was the investigators' case? Well, within 24 hours of finding Kendrick's body, an investigation and autopsy had been carried out, and the authorities ruled it an accidental death, theorising that he'd fallen into the opening at the top of the rolled-up mat, possibly to retrieve a shoe, and that he had become trapped and suffocated. I'm slightly claustrophobic, and the thought of just... what a way to go. If indeed that's really how he did go, but we'll get into that in a little bit, shall we? Now, a few students at the school did confirm that it was quite normal for kids to store their shoes under or behind the rolled-up mats instead of paying for lockers. Yeah, I'm pretty sure we've all been there. Just stash it there, it'll be fine. But what I don't understand is why you'd then try and climb into the mat to get it back out, why you wouldn't just... I mean, he's nearly the same size as this mat. Yeah, give or take a couple of inches. Tip it up slightly, kick the shoe out from underneath. Why would you try and... yeah, climbing down inside it doesn't make any sense to me. Another student said that actually it was quite regular for Kendrick, after gym class, to go up onto the mats, jump up and toss shoes inside the middle of the hole just for fun. Kids. I can imagine kids at my school doing the same thing, going, you can't get your shoes. Now, Kendrick's parents very quickly questioned the accidental death, whereas Lieutenant Stride Jones, who actually headed up the investigation for the Lowndes County Sheriff's Office, he stated, "We never had credible information that indicated that this was anything other than an accident." Logic, maybe? Common sense? I mean, he was nearly the same size as the mat, so if he's gone down there on his hands, surely could have pushed himself up, tipped himself over, crawled out. It just doesn't sit right with me at all. His parents, unfortunately, felt that Kendrick's death was not being taken seriously, in part because of his race, or that because there was actually a larger cover-up at play. Imagine having those thoughts. So Kendrick Johnson was black, and the Lowndes County Sheriff, Chris Pines, and his investigators were all white. And indeed, in 2013, racism in Valdosta, Georgia, was very much still alive. And the family's attorney, Siobhan King, expressed that if Kendrick had been white, the case would have been handled very differently. And all I have to say to that is fuck racism. I mean, fuck racism. We are all human beings at the end of the day. Hopefully things have changed in Valdosta since then. So the Johnsons felt that the Sheriff's Department had been far too quick to label Kendrick's death an accident and to be able to rule out the option of foul play. They were sure that his body had been moved, which the Lowndes County coroner Bill Watson actually confirmed. But why was it moved? Following on with Mr. Watson, Georgia state law dictates that the coroner should be contacted immediately upon the discovery of a body, but Mr. Watson claims that he was not notified until 6 hours later. Anybody come up with any good reason as to why that would be? We've got a dead teenage boy here and nobody's in a rush to get the coroner there. That kind of stinks on many levels. And Kendrick's parents also argued that if this really was an accident, in a high school with over 3,000 students and staff, how did nobody hear him screaming for help? Now, to play devil's advocate, I don't know how well the mat would have stifled the sound, but you would have thought somebody would have heard something. If, of course, he was in any case to scream when he went into the mat, but that's just my theory. Don't come for me. So the Johnsons hired their own investigator, which was William R. Anderson, and he was with Forensic Dimensions in Heathrow, Florida. On June the 15th, 2013, an independent autopsy concluded that Kendrick's body showed signs of blunt force trauma, which would suggest, obviously, that he'd been a victim of foul play, and therefore his death not accidental. So after the opinion of the private pathologist was released, Kendrick Johnson's family stated firmly that they believed he had been murdered. They retained the services of Benjamin Crump, an attorney, and on October the 31st, 2013, so Halloween, US Attorney Michael J. Moore announced that actually his office was going to conduct a formal review into Kendrick's death. Now, unfortunately, Benjamin Crump's application to practice law in Georgia, because he was obviously licensed for Florida, was not ruled on, so he couldn't come and help them, so he had to withdraw from representing the family. It's funny how it's different state to state. Same country. Yeah, we're too small for that. So the Johnson family filed a legal action to open a coroner's inquest into Kendrick's death. And the judge in that case delayed the decision pending the outcome of the US Attorney's review. So the family demanded then that the governor of Georgia immediately authorise the inquiry instead. So the family, along with the NAACP, or the National Association for the Advancement of Coloured People, along with other civil rights activists, held a rally at the Georgia State Capitol in Atlanta. Yes. But the governor's office just simply released a statement indicating that they would wait for the report of the US Attorney. Now we're going to get a bit weird. Okay? Well, not like anything we do here is anything but weirder. So, bearing in mind that Kendrick Johnson had been in this mat upside down for almost a full day before he was found. Yep, a full day. What happens when you're upside down? Yes, the blood rushes to your head, doesn't it? Not a pleasant feeling. And the longer you're upside down, the worse it gets, until eventually you will bleed from your facial orifices. Sorry if that's a grim thing, but, that's just what happens. But in this case, so you're thinking, yes, okay, he's upside down. I mean, his parents did release, oh God, Kendrick's parents did release a picture of his face after everything that had happened, and the swelling, and if you're squeamish, don't go and look for it. That's all I'll say. Yeah, it paints a pretty horrific picture of what being upside down for that long will do to you. Bless him, may he rest in peace. But back to the case. So the black and white shoe, I think it was Adidas, the black and white Adidas shoe that they'd hypothesised Kendrick was reaching in for was below him in the mat, on top of the pool of blood. Yeah, on top of. And there was no blood on the shoe. You think about the little space that this is in. The shoe's going to take up, what did it say it was, 14 inches? The shoe's going to take up a good amount of that. And there's no blood on it. Yet he's upside down, probably thrashing around, dripping from eyes, ears, mouth, nose. Nothing on the shoe. Make it make sense. Now, nearby to Kendrick's body, a pair of orange and black trainers and a hoodie were found, as well as traces of blood on a nearby wall. The blood was eventually deemed not to belong to Kendrick, and that it had been there for some time, which, you're in a high school gym, that's highly plausible. But the investigators didn't take the hoodie or the trainers into evidence. What the fuck? Surely you'd be taking it just to rule it out, if nothing else. Insanity! So this independent autopsy that the parents had commissioned also found that sometime after Kendrick's body had passed through the funeral home, it had actually been stuffed with newspapers. I hear you all going, what? But yes, newspapers. So the funeral home that processed the body following the FBI's autopsy, which was the first one, they stated that they never received Kendrick's internal organs from the coroner. And the organs were said to have been destroyed through natural process and discarded by the prosecutor before the body was sent back to Valdosta, according to the funeral home owner. So that left a void, which the funeral home filled. And the funeral home owner stated that actually this is quite a standard practice to fill a void in this fashion, and that cotton wool or sawdust can also be used. Unsatisfied, the Johnson family filed a complaint with a regulatory body against the funeral home operator. So then, we've got missing organs, okay? Then we go back to the Georgia Bureau of Investigations, the GBI. They claimed that when the body was sent to the funeral home after the first autopsy, that Kendrick's organs had been put back inside the body. Now somebody's lying somewhere. They don't just go poof. Maybe they do just go poof. Methinks they don't just go poof. So the coroner then jumps in and says that actually no. The organs were not sent to the funeral home because they were too decomposed, and instead they were disposed of beforehand. Now, I'm struggling here. Too decomposed. The boy was upside down in the mat for about a day, and then within the following 24 hours, they'd decided that it was accidental, it was done and dusted. That's how the frig. Nope. My gut's saying nope. It's not right. So as we said, the funeral home said filling the void, as it were, is quite common practice in the process of embalming. A subsequent investigation by the Georgia Secretary of State's office found that whilst the funeral home didn't maybe follow the best practices, and that other material might have been slightly more acceptable than newspaper, they were cleared of any wrongdoing. So, just a slap on the wrists, maybe pick some better filling, but no, they didn't actually do anything wrong. They hadn't violated any rules. So instead, the Johnson family filed a civil lawsuit against the funeral home, seeking monetary damages, but this was later dropped. But regardless of anything else, the organs were gone, lost, poof, whatever, and therefore could not be tested further during the second or third autopsies. So this then obviously further aroused suspicion in Kendrick's parents that this was a cover-up. And I can't say I blame them. Now, as a result of this new evidence, the US Attorney for the Middle District of Georgia, Matthew Moore, announced that a formal review of the case would be undertaken. The Johnsons hoped for a coroner's inquest, which would begin the process of reclassifying the cause of his death as non-accidental, and this would then get the investigation reopened. However, this was denied. Even though the coroner, Bill Watson, had expressed originally a lack of confidence in the Sheriff Department's handling of the case, which in itself says a lot, they denied it. Nuts. In November of 2013, nearly 300 hours of surveillance tape from 35 cameras that were covering the gym area were released to CNN, because CNN put a request into the court. Well done, CNN. They then enlisted a forensic analyst who found that tapes from 2 cameras were missing and an hour and 5 minutes of footage, whilst another set were missing 2 hours and 10 minutes of footage. Supposedly, some of the apparent lapses in the coverage were a result of camera systems not synchronized with one another. I mean, this is ridiculous, but the timestamps on some of the cameras differed by as much as 20 minutes. So this gives the impression of gaps where there were actually no gaps at all. Some of the other missing footage was just simply the result of the camera's motion-activated function not being triggered. I mean, I've got a Ring doorbell and it can be wonderful, but there are other times I'm standing in front of it going, hello, why aren't you working? So the area where Kendrick's body was discovered, where the gym mat storage was, sadly was not covered by surveillance cameras. Now, CNN did gain access to the school's security footage on the day that Kendrick was killed, or died, but after watching it, they realised that it basically gave no insight into what happened that day. The cameras facing the mats weren't very well focused and skipped and jumped about, and so all that you could see from the cameras was Kendrick walking towards the gym, and then several seconds of him jogging inside it. He was never shown leaving the gym, and he didn't turn up for any of his following classes. Now, an hour of the missing footage, conveniently, was right at the time that would have shed some light on what happened that day. Getting Epstein vibes on this one. So this obviously further increased in people's minds that his death was not an accident. The more I learn about this case, the more I'm certain it wasn't an accident. It just... to have been a fly on the wall. Well, no, maybe I wouldn't want it to have been a fly on the wall. We'll take that back. In 2014... Kendrick's parents filed a wrongful death suit against Lowndes County Board of Education, its superintendent, and the school's principal. Now, the suit alleged that Kendrick was violently assaulted, severely injured, suffered great physical pain and mental anguish, and subjected to insult and loss of life. So while the lawsuit didn't name the person, or persons, that were allegedly involved, it didn't even identify the race of the alleged perpetrators, but it did imply a race-based dimension to the hypothetical assault. It alleged that the defendants were negligent and violated Johnson's constitutional right to equal protection based on race. It also alleged that the defendants ignored reports that previously Johnson had been repeatedly attacked and harassed by a white student, and that Johnson was attacked on a bus trip 14 months prior to his death. The lawsuit would also allege that student Brian Bell had a history of provoking and attacking Kendrick at school, stating that the provocations took place in the presence of the coaching staff and employees, and after his mother had complained about previous attacks. The suit also alleged that school officials failed to properly monitor the activities of students throughout all areas of the campus and to maintain a properly functioning video surveillance system. Well, I'm with them on the last bit, but I think we do need to give teachers a bit of a break as well. They can only do so much, and if your kids are little bastards, it's generally because of the parents, not the teachers. Now, website ebony.com did actually put that the murder of Kendrick had been at the hands of two white brothers. They also didn't name any names, but the description of these brothers very closely resembled Brian and his brother Brandon Bell. And the magazine claimed that they'd killed Kendrick because of a fight they had over a year earlier, which had escalated. But in August of 2014, a $5 million lawsuit was filed against Ebony magazine. Because that's one hell of an accusation to make. But then the Johnsons are busy throwing some mud as well. Can't really blame them, but you have to be careful. So the Johnson family accused the brother's father, who was an FBI agent at the time, of covering up the murder by manipulating the school and the authorities involved in investigating Kendrick's death. That is one hell of an accusation. In 2015, the Johnson family filed a $100 million civil lawsuit against 38 people. It included 3 of their son's classmates, the school, the local crime lab, state and federal officials, 5 agents of the GBI, an FBI agent, and more. The parents had asserted that the sons of the FBI agent had killed Kendrick and then used their connections to cover up the investigation. Well, it wouldn't be the first time, would it? But in November of 2015, the Department of Justice filed a motion to the civil case to intervene and stay the case. So the US attorney said that allowing evidence discovery in the civil suit to continue would have a chilling effect on the federal investigation, which had expanded into investigating possible obstruction and grand jury witness tampering. So after the Justice Department's motion was denied, Kendrick Johnson's parents dismissed their own wrongful death lawsuit, saying that they did hope to refile after the conclusion of the federal investigation. Kendrick's father, however, admitted that he actually had no hard evidence to back up any of the claims that they'd made, and the Johnsons had to drop the suit altogether. They were then sued for more than $850,000 in attorney fees and more than $1 million in defamation charges. Well, you've got to be careful what you say, where you say it, and who you say it to. Free speech ain't free no mo'. The Johnsons were ultimately ordered by a judge to pay close to $300,000 worth of lawyers' fees to those that they had accused with no evidence. Ouch. Sadly, in June of 2016, the Department of Justice announced that no charges would be filed against anyone in relation to Kendrick Johnson's death, considering insufficient evidence to support federal criminal charges. Yeah. So as far as the feds were concerned, the case was officially and finally closed. However, the family still weren't having it. The Johnson family requested that Kendrick's body be exhumed for a second time, and permission was granted by the Valdosta city officials. And so on June the 22nd, 2018, Kendrick's body was exhumed again. Poor boy. But then, if the truth's still out there... So the third autopsy was done. And what did it find? Well, that the death was not accidental. It was found that Kendrick's death was caused by blunt force trauma, likely due to being struck in the neck with a 45-pound dumbbell. So the family's suspicions were confirmed. So obviously, Kendrick's parents hoped that with the results of this third autopsy, the surveillance footage which they were convinced had been tampered with, and the mishandling of evidence at the scene would be enough to reopen their son's case. I know, I'd be hoping the same thing, and I mean, it does sound like they've got a strong case. But unfortunately it appears that their quest for answers has only led to more questions. But In March of 2021, authorities did reopen the investigation into Kendrick Johnson's death. But, finally, in March of 2021, authorities reopened their investigation into Kendrick Johnson's death. And according to Lowndes County Sheriff Ashley Polk, if there's questions, and they're legitimate, I need to know the answers myself. The only way I'm going to know is to look at the evidence myself. Well, there are questions, and they are legitimate. We can all see that, can't we? So Polk and his team were able to secure a wealth of evidence, that's the word I'm looking for, from federal authorities, and this was in part thanks to an appeal from the Johnson family. So now, in theory, the sheriffs have enough evidence in hand to perhaps, maybe, allow them to solve this mystery once and for all? Maybe? Possibly? No. No. Fuck's sake. Maddeningly, very, very maddeningly, because the math is just not mathing, in January of 2022, Kendrick Johnson's death was ruled accidental again. Yeah. Case closed, no charges filed. Polk stated no homicide, no cover-up, and no conspiracy in Kendrick's death. And that's where we are to this day. It just doesn't make sense. I don't get it. I mean, I know accidents happen and people have been found in stupid positions, and you kind of go, how the fuck did you end up there? Really? But it's not sitting right. I genuinely hope that the family get the closure that they need, because it sounds like, unfortunately, they're being left in limbo, and it's just shit. For lack of a better way of putting it, it's just shit. So that brings us to the end of today's episode. If you made it this far, thank you so much for sticking with me. As always, you can find me on the socials at Seriously Now Pod. And for your content requests, seriously you stories of the weird and wonderful, or just to say hi, it's seriouslynowpod@gmail.com. So until next time, lovelies, stay safe, stay free, and stay weird. Bye-bye.